Hi, Lisa. Welcome back to the Open Door Sisterhood.
Hi, friend. It's been a few years.
It has been, but I feel like I know what's going on in your life. You had a daughter who just graduated from high school, right?
Yes, that's the beauty of social media, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she did, and I just took her. We took her to school, and I've been doing really well. Though I'm kind of proud of myself. I didn't think
Yeah.
I would do this well, but I am. I guess that's what happens when they're kind of, when they're doing well. You're doing well.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
Well, we all three have that in common that we took kids to college this fall.
Mm.
So that's a hard, good thing, just starting out right from the very beginning. Um, so let's just jump in and talk about your book for a second. The hard good, showing up for God to work in you when you want to shut down. Those two words, hard and good, don't tend to go together. So give us the big overview of how these two words are connected.
Well, I think, not every hard thing in life to me is equally redeemable. Um, so the reason why the things that made the book are what I call hard good is because they are hard things that are spiritually transformative if you'll allow God to do that. Right. I mean, there's always choice. So they don't automatically become spiritually transformative. They don't automatically become good in your life. So I don't think there's like a switch. Oh, this is a hard good. It's gonna transfer. It's gonna go from like hard to good. No, they are things that can be good. And what I've found to be the most good in my own life, the most change, the most that have made me a better person, greater perspective, more spiritually confident, which is kind of a weird term, but like, I don't know, even in decision making, things like that. And also more than I could be myself, because I spent a lot of years just thinking, will I ever get better in this area? Because I'm in my own way. And these are the things, many of them in this book, that God has changed me, but they've been through hard things. They haven't been through like a book or a seminar or whatever, 1, 2, 3. And so they had to make the qualifications of hard good in order to make this particular book, not just hard.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us an example of something that's in the book that was hard and God did do something good with it?
Yeah. Well, every chapter for me, it applies. I think um, one that comes to my mind is universal for most people that I've talked to, is accepting something that you wish were something different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that has played out in my life in so many ways, from, body parts that I haven't preferred to, um, something that I felt was an injustice, because I'm a justice driven person. So accepting something that I felt like I in some way could have had power to change, or felt like wasn't right. Boy, that's been a hard lesson for me. And then my father's death, in
Mm-hmm.
2017 was something that I wish were something different. I mean, I could probably list examples from every week of my life since I've been born, right? Um, so that's one that comes easily to mind. Yeah.
Yeah, you said not everything qualifies for kind of that hard good. So, can you talk to the woman who's looking at something that's really hard in her life and saying,
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know if this qualifies because I don't know that this can ever be used for good. How does she look at something really difficult? Maybe it's a divorce or infidelity or abuse, something that she thinks there is no way that good can come from this.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, because I think we look at our life as very topical, right? So like we go, oh, so this thing happened to me, or that thing happened to me. And I get it, because whatever's happening in our life that particular moment or whatever is in many ways all consuming. But if we really understand the totality of our life, and if we really understand what we're here for and what is happening inside of us, it's far less about this circumstance and that circumstance and this one and that one. That doesn't necessarily help when you're grieving the loss of someone you love, or a role that was taken away without your permission, which happens all the time. People can leave us, and that's not on us, right? Like we might have done everything right, air quotes, God's way, whatever, and someone else can decide something for us that we didn't choose. That feels really hard, because it is really hard. There's so many things that come into play with that. So, I think there's a lot of us who have a history of having someone mismanaged our heart. That comes to my mind of, whether it be a broken trust, broken relationship, whatever the case may be. And I would say that, what you really come to understand in those situations is, people are going to disappoint me. They are going to let me down. So it has to become sort of holding the reality of that without living our life as just skeptical, that and closing off our heart to never be open again. Because, someone asked me one time, Lisa, can I live with a closed heart? You can, actually, because I've seen people live with a closed heart and die with one. But you can't really, if you want to live while you're living, right? Because there's a lot of us that are walking around with heartbeats and pulses, but we're not really alive. And so what I would say is, you just have to come to the place where you are, where you say, I believe that God can hold my heart, even while I understand that someone else might mismanage my trust. And you allow those to be in two different categories.
That's really interesting. I heard a counselor say the other day that pain is inevitable in life. Suffering is optional. And that little statement just stopped me in my tracks. And I thought, well, that is really interesting. And so how we are carrying that pain, and I think it a little bit gets back to what you were just saying about a closed heart versus an open heart, and how we respond to that pain. I think that's what he was really talking about, was when we respond to that pain over and over with that closed heart, we suffer, and we carry that suffering of that pain, which I thought was fascinating. I never heard someone say it like that. Would you agree with that? Or what are your thoughts?
I was sitting here thinking, do I agree with that or not? A good Enneagram 8 would never completely agree with someone just because they said it. Although I would also respect a counselor. And so I'm not one. So I don't try to play one on TV. I don't know. I think it's hard to, there are a lot of people who, I've just heard so many personal stories that it is hard for me to say that people aren't suffering. I don't know. I think I know too much about the world. And it would be hard for me to say that those two things are separate. I do understand exactly how you explained it. I think was really, really, really astute, which is the prolonged sort of grieving and the responsibility of us in it, which I think in some ways, Krista, it's like we think, okay, grief is going to happen, and then all of this happens to us. And that's really important to understand that even though things happen to us, and so many things that we did not bring on ourselves, or we did not know was coming, or we didn't ask for, there is still this opportunity for choice in the way we travel through things. And even like in chapter 1, when I talk about, moving from the stifling what ifs, which are usually centered around the 3, what if I, what if they, or what if God, sort of that mental tornado that we have that keep us stuck in trying to rewrite history. moving into what is. I mean,
Mhm.
that is our own sort of responsibility and ability to do that with the help of God, because I don't believe we can just muscle that up. I mean, none of us are that strong. I mean, I think I'm pretty strong, but I'm not that strong. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I don't know. Grief and suffering is hard, and I honor it a lot. So it's hard for me to put too many really good sounding positive spins on if someone is suffering. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, that's just the reality of it for me.
Mhm. Yeah. So I think that's an interesting conversation there. And I think I like what you said about there's still choice in it, because
Yeah.
sometimes we don't feel like we have a choice
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
in it. In fact, often what happens to us isn't a choice. And so,
Mhm.
but then to just kind of reclaim the choice of, okay,
Yes.
now I do have a choice of how I'm going to move from here, even though maybe that event or that situation or that, it wasn't a choice. So can you speak a little bit to that journey of leaning into that and how we make that transition? And okay, let's just use your father's death as an example.
Mhm.
And gosh, Lisa, when you were going through that, because I'm a daddy's girl, I mean, as Alex knows, like my dad, my hero.
Yeah.
And so like, as you're going through that, like, I just felt like I was right there with you. And
Mhm.
let's just take that as an example. So that catastrophic event in your life, you didn't have a choice. Then
Right.
where did you go?
Yeah. That's a perfect example, actually. I felt like, Krista, when he died, I knew that I could go one way or the other. Like I really could hide, melt away, also refuse to do anything else with my own personal call in my life, because you have to understand, so much of my life was intertwined with my father and his legacy, because my father was this incredible orator. He was a pastor. So many people my whole life would say, you're just like your father. And on one hand, I felt the compliment of that was like I see a similar gifting, but I also heard it many years as a young woman as like, you're going to have the same problems and issues as him, because he had a public ministry fall, and he spent his life wrestling, and he ran away a lot. And I have those same tendencies, honestly. And so I knew that this was a moment where I could shut down, run away from the call, say, I don't want to do this anymore. Because honestly, the ministry world for me is a wrestle. It's hard. It's not, I don't love a lot of the things that go with it. And I spend sometimes too much mental time even thinking through like, God, is this something I need to be doing? Is this not something I'm supposed to be doing? It's enough to really drive you mad, honestly, if you're a person that thinks through things like this. And so that piece, but then also the other piece of, my mom started dating someone within 4 months of my father's death. And I have to tell you, and that moment, I knew I also was going to have there was a crossroads. And I thought, I'm going to either be overwhelmed in this tsunami of grief, and I will shut him out, because my shutdown MO is shutting people out. And I'm good at it. I can do it. That I knew I would shut him out, or I would have to immediately decide that I was going to embrace the relationship, walk through the pain of it to get to the other side. And that's what I decided to do. And I won't tell you that it was easy, but I will tell you that every time that I walked through it, it got a little bit easier. And I'm grateful I did it, because otherwise I would be in a lot of trouble now.
Mhm. So that's an example of, it was hard and there was good that came from it because you stood in the hard. And that gets back to accepting what is, right? You had to accept
Right.
this is the reality, because you could deny it. Like you said, there is an option to have a closed heart. There is an option to live in denial. It's just not dealing with what actually is happening in the world. And the amazing thing is that God is with us in our denial. He doesn't confirm it, but he hasn't left us. And he's also with us when we deal with the reality. So why not stand in the reality for a minute? And I can answer that question because I'm a person who avoids a lot of things that are uncomfortable. And so dealing with what is can often feel so scary because we want to protect and control. And by saying, I'm going to look at reality and I'm going to deal with whatever is coming my way, means I'm going to be giving up control a little bit, even though we don't really have control. It's the illusion of control. I'm going to give up the illusion of control. And then what I find as a person who tends to avoid hard things is that I made it way worse in my mind than actually facing it. And sometimes the hard of the hard good, the hard is just my own mental wrestling that I'm doing with myself, because I'm telling myself all of the what ifs. And those are much more difficult to deal with than the what is usually.
Mm-hmm. All of that is a big yes. I can attest to the same thing. I mean, it's not like, and I write about this in chapter 1, it's not like I was looking for another dad. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was parented by my favorite person in the world for 46 years. We had a great thing going. I didn't want another dad. So not only was I mourning the loss of my favorite person, but I was also then being asked to put someone else in that sort of role, right? So, and here's the thing about me. It's not like I'm some kind of, I'm just some kind of open-hearted person. Actually, no, not at all. I don't welcome people into my heart and into my life easy. I have trust issues from past, broken relationships. I love hard, but it takes me a minute to get there. So, one of the reasons why I spent time on talking about this in the early chapters, I needed people to know the depth of how much I loved my father. And also that this was a hard fought choice. My bonus dad has a ranch, and very early on, I decided to go to the ranch. I mean, they were newlyweds and, still doing cute things. And it was painful. It was painful. There wasn't, there was no sign of my father at the ranch. There was nothing. And in fact, my father would have loved the ranch. He was a hunter, but I decided to go and face it, because I thought I will face this one day or the other. If I don't face it now, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to face it for months, maybe years. But I'll carry it with me, and it'll be like being burned every single time that I hear about it, see pictures. I knew it was going to be a part of my life. So I went and I cried many, many days, and I ended up filming my Bible studies there. Why? Because I needed to sit in it. I needed to sit in it and feel it. And I believe that's why that, even the book came from that. And I think even that maybe will help people even more, because it was hard fought. It wasn't just words on paper,
Oh, I love that you filmed the Bible study there.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about how hard that would be for me. I mean, I'm telling you, like, we have a similar kind of wiring toward our dads, and man, that would be so hard. That would be so hard. And it really, that speaks to me that even you filmed there. It's really beautiful. Okay. So I want to get to this question of change, and this idea that when change happens, or back to choice, we have a choice of how we're going to walk through it. But what's interesting, and I really like the conversation you two were having just there about the anticipation is often worse than the reality. We create, like, the war so much happens up here in our minds, and we literally are at war, right, with whatever it is. And so in you kind of going to the ranch and facing that change and leaning into that change, that's what that looked like for you. But can you speak to a little bit, like, how would you encourage people to lean into change in a way that maybe is even embodied, or that feels like they are really stepping forward into it as opposed to hiding from it or keeping it stuck in their heads?
Mm. Change it's a huge part of this process. I mean, here's the thing. This is what I've learned about change in the last few years, because my life has been constant change. I would say for the last 3 years, from my zip code to my body, to my kids, to my marriage, to my dad dying and getting another bonus dad. I mean, everything, to the world. I would say this, that I learned, if you do not welcome in change, you will be overcome by the sadness of it.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, Krista, that was just something for me that I realized a lot of my life had been spent just like, I guess, resolving to change. Sort of like, okay, well, if it's going to come, I guess I'll live with it, you know? And it might sound like a small perspective change, but it's actually huge. It's actually like, I'm going to welcome it in before it intrudes. You know, even like, the biggest, one of the biggest examples for me was, my girlfriend called me a couple years ago, and she was on her way to her son's wedding. And she said to me, she said, "Lisa, I'm having the hardest time. My only son is getting married. What am I supposed to do?" Now, mind you, my kids hadn't gotten married at this time. So I'm like literally praying, like, Lord, give me something, because I got nothing. I got nothing to tell her. I don't know. I have no idea. And I just went into a strength mode. The Lord gave me something. And I said, "You know what you're going to do?" I said, "You're going to mom him so hard right now." I said, "You are going to dance and smile and have fun, and you're going to do what you've always done, which is be an incredible mom. You're going to mom him so hard." And to me, that's an example of like, and I had to follow my own advice eventually. You welcome it in even when you don't feel like it. You know, you what you want to do is, you want to take your son, when they get married, over to the corner and literally wrap them up in your arms and rock them like a tiny little baby and go, "Remember when you loved me the very most and I was your mom?" You want to stroke their
Totally.
hair. Let me tell you something. You can't do that.
Right.
That's the reality of life.
Mhm.
But what you can do is, you can welcome in that change. You can love who they love, and you can dance and you can smile. And, you know, some might say, "Well, isn't that faking it?" Well, what I would say is that, you know, your feelings have this incredible ability to be bossed by a power that is higher than you, and it is given to you by the Holy Spirit. And it's wonderful, because you can, in that moment, literally welcome it in, and it'll change you. It really changes you. And then your feelings really do accompany that so many, many times. And it's okay if you cry. It's okay, because guess what? It's hard and good. We live in a tension, and we need to get used to it. If we're going to make ourselves pick, then we're going to really, really be frustrated a lot. We're going to live in the tension, and we're always going to live in a tension.
Yeah, that's true. That tension of the hard and the good is the life, and especially the life of faith, because we see the world as it is, and we see the hope of what can be. And so that tension is there. And I'm so grateful for it, because I have the hope. And I also have the reality of what is, because I think people can live in extremes on both sides. If if you have no hope, the world is a very dark place and very difficult.
Yes.
And if you deny reality and just are thinking about things that feel good, that's not really understanding what we're dealing with. And also, as a person of faith, not seeing God's true redemption and potential. If
Yep.
all we want to see is the good and not the hard with it. And so, as people are living in the moment, the cultural moment, the political moment, the historical moment of our country, and it feels like tension is taut, like the rope is so tight that if someone lets go, it's going to smack someone else in the face. How do you encourage people to live in that tension and hold it in a healthy way so that it's not suffocating us or strangling us, but that it's just the reality of being embodied souls in a broken world?
Well, that's a big question. It's a good one, and it is the one that we're going to have to wrestle. I think that is a part of it. I think that when we take on this sort of role, Alex, of thinking we've got to be everybody's answer, everybody's hero, everybody's conscience, everybody's all of that, that's when we get in really big trouble. It's just not our job. It's just too big for us. It's each day has a trouble of its own. Each person has trouble of our own, which doesn't recuse us of the responsibility of carrying the tenderness for other people in the world. That's one of the reasons why it's so important that our emotions and our feelings get put in their right role, right? So that they're in their best functioning position, because when they are in their best functioning God-given position, then what they do is they help us walk through this world with tenderness for people, but yet with the wisdom of the Holy Spirit to understand that it really isn't our job to change people or change anybody's minds.
Mm-hmm.
We can't anyway. And I find that people that are the biggest vigilantes are the ones that really don't understand their role. And they really think that, and sometimes with really great intentions, that that the loud shouting or the inflammatory language or whatever they use is going to actually help or persuade. And it just doesn't do that. What does do that is people caring and understanding, which, by the way, I think is only really possible when you have the actual love of Christ flowing through you. Otherwise, you are kind to people, but there's always some backhanded something in it for you, right? I mean, look, you can be kind, but at the end of the day, it's not that noble if you really just are doing it for a checklist or to make yourself feel better, which humans are really good at doing. But when you have the love of Christ flowing through you, you actually do care about people. And I think when we understand that all of us are dealing with something hard, not one of us has been excused from that, and we are all maneuvering, living in this tension. And that really what we can do is what we can be good to each other in that, and love God and lead people to the person that's going to help them the very most. It just relieves us from the responsibility to change others, and it just has us carry a different tone, I think.
I love that. It relieves us of the responsibility to change others. I mean, we can just pause right there on that quote, because it's that idea of a little bit of letting go of outcome, right? When we're too tied to the outcome of our actions, then it creates all kind of crazy in us. And control, I mean, back to Alex's, control point, that we like to create these systems of control. So as we're looking at that idea, and you're looking at kind of this like how to love people well in the hard good. I've got kind of a question for two sides of this coin. How did people love you well when you were walking through it? And then in turn, how have you loved people better? Just loving them well and not having an agenda, not trying to push anything, but just like, how did you receive that and how are you giving it differently?
I love this question. I love it so much because it gives me a chance to believe the best in people again, even when I hear myself say it, because I can be really skeptical. Like I said, it's interesting. When Dad died, I think I've carried throughout my life this belief. I know I have. I wrote about this, not in the book, but on a blog. I carried throughout my life this belief because my dad, had this public ministry fall. Subsequently, I think I realized that I, for so many years, had felt really hurt by the church and by people who spread rumors about our family, which is very typical for a pastor's family, and just felt really broken by people, and trust was broken and so forth. I think I felt like that people didn't love me, that people didn't love my dad, therefore they couldn't love me because I was so protective. And when Dad died, I remember people just came out of the woodwork to like send me texts and cards and, flowers. And I remember thinking, you know what? I think I was wrong. I think they always loved me. I think they loved me all along. I think I didn't realize. And what dawned on me through that was a lot of times when we've historically had hard things, like our life has been hard, and particularly with people, and they've let us down a lot. We look for a letdown. We look for a letdown instead of love. And I think for me, that's been the case for so much of my life. I've looked for letdown instead of love. I've expected people to let me down. And I think what I learned was our lens sometimes is off. We don't even see the love. It's hard for us to receive it. We look for the letdown. And I think it can really change if we will even ask God, let me look for the love rather than the letdown. It's profoundly changed the way that I love people. Oh gosh. I mean, I think God began to change my heart a lot towards people. I used to be a real independent. I'm still a real independent. You can ask my husband. I'm a real independent, but I think I always said that or really waved that flag a lot because I didn't want to get hurt. It's a good protective mode. It's a good superwoman sort of shield to just not need anybody. But I realized some years ago that I just couldn't do it by myself anymore, and that if they hurt me, that I would be okay ultimately, because I have been hurt before and I survived. I'm here. And it's taken the pressure off, I think, Krista, me for people. So I don't expect people to be better than any of us really can be as humans. I really don't. Things don't shock me, really. I don't get nearly as angry, which for an 8 Enneagram is powerful because I could spend my life being like in a white hot rage, like honestly.
Yeah.
And historically, for many years of my life, I did, So when the Holy Spirit changes you and you see yourself where you carry the message of fighting for justice, but you do it in a way that you function and that you love, that's when you've been changed. And I think that's one of the reasons why I believe so much in even talking about welcoming change in your life, because I know that God can change you because God has changed me. And I think it's really powerful when your natural personality can be changed by the power of the Holy Spirit, because then you can really, really move forward with being usable. And yeah, it's really changed the way that I function in life and carry people's burdens and, but yet don't want to go out and punch everybody in the face.
Yeah, we don't want punching.
I still want to punch people in the face on others' behalf. That's where that's anytime I want to punch someone, it's always for someone else. Because that's the way
you're not being a bully, you're being a defender.
That's exactly right. I just actually talked to someone about that on their Enneagram show. I said, the funny thing is, they were asking me a story about when I knew for the first time I was an 8 Enneagram. I said, I think it was when I was on the playground when I was a little kid, and someone was bullying someone else, and I went to step in to that fight. The funny thing about 8 Enneagrams is you always think they're the bully, but actually they're the ones that would fight the bully.
Yeah. The defender. I know. I love 8 Enneagrams. I love them. Okay. As we are coming to a close on this wonderful conversation, which I don't want it to end, I want it to go on forever and ever. What would you say are 3 ways that listeners can look for good in the world, or how are you finding good right now as you're navigating your days?
I think looking for good is always a battle for me, because I, again, don't come into the world perpetually positive. I think, first of all, it's the commitment to presence has been really powerful for me, and it is taking the pressure off of any idea that I'm going to do it perfectly. So it's literally the commitment to presence, saying, I'm here. God, I'm here. Help me to even to see good somehow in all this stuff. I think that's really powerful, because we don't even say that on a daily basis. We don't stop long enough. We just see that. I think also really, really listening to all the facets that God created me with, which are body, mind, spirit, we know, because he names them in the Bible. So really I've been paying attention to those things. I've been paying attention to what my mind is saying. I've been paying attention to what my body is telling me, which has helped me know when I'm really kind of shutting down, when I'm not doing so well, when I'm kind of feeling like I'm tired for no reason, or when I feel like I am not wanting to talk to somebody, and not being so strict with myself, but knowing, okay, there might be something underneath that I need to talk to the Lord about, that I need to deal with, maybe that I need to go to a counselor about, but really paying attention to my body. That's been a way to help me, because here's the thing, you can't even see good if you're not taking care of you at all. If you're not even, like, you can't even get into that conversation. And I think it's also one of the things I talk about in chapter 2, which is cheering for someone else who gets what you want. I think one way that's really helped me see the good in my own life, the gratitude that I think at times is really blocked, has been this wild generosity that God's called me into, which is really being generous with other people, because it has allowed me to see what I have in my life that is also good. It's weird, because you think, well, if I give to other people, if I'm generous to other people, that's going to deplete me, but it actually does the opposite. And so I think that's been another thing that's helped me really see, oh, this is actually really good in my life. And it's really small things, but it's powerful. I love the fig tree in my yard. I love, just I love my dog. I love, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be huge things in your life that are good, but they can still be really good.
I would love a fig tree.
Yes.
In my
cool?
yard.
I know.
That is so cool. We can't grow fig trees.
I've never had
here.
one. I've never had one in my life. It's very cool.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Lisa, go ahead, Alex.
Oh, I was just going to say, the little things are what make up a good life. It's all those little things together and recognizing them. And you mentioned the pace of life, and just stopping to be present to recognize that makes a huge difference. And we are so crazy hectic, even coming off of a year and a half where things slowed down significantly for a number of us. they seem to quickly go right back to the pace of chaos. And being able to stop and say, this is good. The fact that I have a special creamer for my coffee this morning, I was just kind of amazed at that. Like, there's like 25 kinds of creamer at the grocery store. And who am I to live in a world and a time when I have that many options?
Yeah. I mean, well, it is true when you look at, also, I think perspective is really powerful. I mean, I think we follow people on social media that seem to have a better life than we do. But what about following, I don't know. I mean, for me, like I follow Open Doors and things like that. They keep me aware of like things like persecution in other places. I mean, I know that feels heavy, but it's like, it does keep you aware of what you have in your life. And I think that's super important, because in this culture, all we do is look at something that looks better. But what about, the reality of, honestly, so many other places in this world? When you talk about the creamer, I'm like, we have such privilege to even have 25 different kinds of creamer, right?
Right. And that's what the living in the what is helps us, because it does give us perspective when we can see how God has blessed us and the good gifts that he has given us. I mean, running water every day. I try to remind myself when I'm washing the dishes, how fortunate am I to have a dishwasher to load and to have clean water to use, and warm water if I want it, or cold water if I want it. I mean, it's just the basics. And those are the good things. The small, we might say they're small, but somebody else might say they're quite big.
Well, it's interesting. I don't know if you two ever listened to Sean Aker, but he is a happiness researcher and he graduated from Harvard. He's brilliant. But anyway, he says, he talks about in his book, Big Potential, he talks about how companies that are really smart will actually bring in other people and have the employees take them around, because he said what they're constantly doing is getting the employees to call out the good in what's happening in their culture of their company. And it's interesting because we have a foreign exchange student this year, and I'm noticing that, like, he's kind of calling out the good, and I'm like calling out the good of these different things. And it really is powerful. And I was like, interesting. Like, if you could actually create that in your own life, where you're just practicing calling out the good, because what you're doing, like with my foreign exchange student, I am calling out things that I take for granted every day, because he's new. He doesn't know all these things. Right. And it's really been fun to be able to call out the ordinary good that I normally ignore. So I thought that was an interesting point.
Yeah. Well,
Lisa, thank you. What would be maybe one last piece of encouragement you would have for listeners today about the hard good?
I would let them know that, if they know Jesus, if they have faith, which informs my entire life, that they will be okay. They really will. It doesn't end with hard. If that was it, and it was just going to end with hard, then this will be a different conversation, but it really does end good. And that is something that they can know for sure. Doesn't end with hard, it ends with good. No matter how it actually ends in this life, it ends good. If you know Jesus, it ends good.
Amen. It's a great note to end on. All right, Lisa. Well, thank you so much. This is one of my favorite book titles of all time, I have to say. I absolutely love it because it's just true. You read it and you go, that's true. It just rings true from even the title of the book, but the book is so good.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.